just going to start with a definition of least restrictive environment. And I mean, the reason I want to talk about least restrictive environment is I think that the general shared impression among attorneys, at least in California, that do special education, is that if it's at all possible for your child with autism to be fully included in general education, that's what you're going to want to strive for. You're going to want to strive for appropriate supports, of course, but, least restrictive environment in order to be able to have your child be exposed to normal language, normal peer modeling, normal curriculum, normal activities. So for that reason, understanding how the law works with respect to least restrictive environment is important. Now, I don't want to make people feel like if their child is in a special ed class that this discussion has nothing for them. Least restrictive environment is not a place. Least restrictive environment often is general ed, but often it can also be something else. And so for parents whose kids are in a special day class, or parents whose kids are in the hospital, or parents whose kids are medically fragile and they're receiving services at home, it's still important to understand what LRE, least restrictive environment, is. Okay, so that's why we're going to talk about it. We feel like in any setting that you're in, it's going to be important for you to be asking whether the environment can be modified in any way to make it more inclusive for your child. So I'm just going to start with the definition of what least restrictive environment is, and I'm going to read it. Least restrictive environment is the requirement in federal law that students with disabilities receive their education to the maximum extent appropriate with non-disabled peers, and that special education students are not removed from regular classes, even with supplemental aids and services. Unless, even with supplemental aids and services, education in regular classes cannot be achieved satisfactorily. So for a person that's in general ed and the district is proposing to move him out of general ed and into a special day class, to me, the discussion item for the IEP meeting, the first discussion item is, well, what about supplemental aids and services, and who can present information about the student about how supplemental aids and services have been the reason he's been able to participate in the past, and so on. And so you can see how the analysis would also apply to somebody who isn't in general ed full-time, but might be, let's say, mainstream for part of his school day as well. So there are a lot of terms that people throw around in discussing least restrictive environment. You'll hear people talk about mainstreaming. You'll hear people talking about integration. You'll hear people talking about full inclusion. And you'll hear people talking about reverse mainstreaming. So those terms do not really have a legal meaning, and sometimes they're used in different ways by different people, but I at least thought I would throw out for consideration what I think those things mean or may mean. So mainstreaming, as I understand it, is taking somebody who has an IEP and needs special education and related services, but including him in a less restrictive setting, which could be a different kind of special day class. It could be like a resource classroom or something, or it could be the general ed environment. But the notion is that for some part of his day, but not his whole day, he's going to be in a different environment other than his special education general placement that he's in. Integration is kind of also a term that's used for a lot of different things. I think it generally just means including somebody in some level or at some level into mainstream or general education opportunities. And those could be like the extracurricular opportunities that schools have for music, for PE, for after-school clubs, for any other non-academic school subject. You could be integrated in some degree into those classes. Full inclusion to me, sort of is like the same thing as mainstreaming, except for that full inclusion means that you're going to be, you have an IEP, you have a disability, but you're going to be in the general education classroom for 100% of the school day. And you have seen on your IEP where it says, it will say percentage of the day that the student is going to be outside of general ed, and they're supposed to write a percentage, and that percentage sort of reflects the ratio of how much you're included versus how much you're in your special day class. Reverse mainstreaming means, well, it means a couple of things, but one of the things it means is you take students that are not disabled and you bring them into the special education classroom so that all of those people, all of those children or peers can socialize. The thing about reverse mainstreaming or any mainstreaming that's really important is it requires a knowledge of how to do full inclusion or mainstreaming, and it's more than just bringing a bunch of kids together and, telling them, okay, now go play. It's not going to work that way. If you really want to do reverse mainstreaming or you want to do inclusion for students with IEPs, with more non-disabled peers, you got to have a roadmap about how you're going to do it. So it does require some training. But those are the terms that we run into that are used to discuss different ways of ensuring that people are entitled to the mandate of least restrictive environment. So I think I'm going to stop here and I'm going to pick it up next week. But we're going to have a rather lengthy discussion about all the opportunities that exist for students to be mainstreamed and how you can use supplementary aids and services to access least restrictive environment, oftentimes the general ed curriculum. So that's some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about because I think it's really important for all of us to know what our options are.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, and I'm glad we took a minute to do that. As always, you teach us things that we did not know before. So thank you, because this is important stuff. And I thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And so tell them a little bit about Hirji and Chow again.
Hirji and Chow. Okay, Hirji and Chow, if you live in Southern California and you want a complimentary intake, you can call us 310-391-0330. We have a lot of stuff up at our website that's interesting for you to look at, including that article on vaccine exemptions, although it's not really current. The website is www.lawyer4, so lawyer4children.com. Again, I'm really pleased at the quality and the depth of the questions. You're making me have to think. That's a good thing for my aging brain. Everybody have a good week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. We really appreciate you. All right. Bye-bye.